Those stories fascinate me. And unfortunately for the Broncos, one of the most intriguing stories involving a free agent, which is a veteran, Woody, is Antonio Smith. He's back. He'll be at camp, as I reported yesterday, and they need him. And it's a very weird situation because he had this 6-month case of child abuse where no charges have been filed. And if they're not, they need this guy. And he's a leader on that defense. But what happens if something does happen with this case? So they're in a fascinating position here. Obviously, they believe him that he's going to be cleared in this case because Antonio Smith's presence became a much bigger issue now that Derek Wolf's suspended for 4 games. But of the younger guys, the kicker, everyone has some fascination with. You mentioned. I don't know. I got to see it. I mean, there's a reason he hasn't been in the league for ever. It's one of his things that make great YouTube clips. But to make an NFL team is an entirely different story.
Yeah, and if Les were in charge of viewing the YouTube clips, he'd think that it was photoshopped. And we don't know whether. I mean, it might have been. I mean, there might have been a ball on the string that went 72 yards. I want to be serious. After the Antonio Smith conversation, and we've had it with you several times, and you've written about it, and you've been on top of it more than anybody. I did my own investigation to the point I could. And I think we're kind of downplaying at least what the investigation is about. And when I read about what the investigation involves, and I don't know whether you want to talk about it or whether we're going to go very far at it, but that's a very serious, disgusting charge that's against him. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, the sheriff, when they filed it to the district attorney, the information, it was criminal abuse of sexual nature. And it was a very serious charge. But what makes this different than others is that the charge came in, the original complaint came in November of 2014. The DA was presented the evidence by the sheriff in February. 6 months later, charges haven't been filed. So there's 2 things. A, there either is not enough evidence, or B, there's some doubt from the DA that they could prosecute based on this witness account. I mean, the DAs, typically don't take cases. They have no chance of winning. Now, does that mean that he's absolved from guilt? That's a different story. But Antonio Smith, Woody, is expected to talk on Friday, and I doubt he talks at length about this, but I would expect him to address this, and he will be asked about it. I know that for a fact. So it's going to be interesting. They've talked to Smith. They've talked to the league. The Broncos were in a situation here, Woody. They talked to the league about the procedures and protocols of the personal conduct policy. Because he has not been charged, he almost has to be at camp and be given the opportunity to make the team without them cutting him. This idea of continuing to recommend that he stay away, while an option, it's not a great option because then he could use the union to use leverage to get back into camp. So they got caught in this situation. You can't be half pregnant. Either they were going to cut him and move on completely, or believe in him and what has happened and what their information says and put him back on the field and have trust that he's going to be exonerated.
Well, it's and more details are going to come out. It's just not a very pretty sight.